Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming and a new video on the channel. With all the talk about how melee's in a ridiculously bad place, I thought I would take a build that doesn't rely on double hitting or Nightblade support and see how much more difficult and expensive it is to make a melee character viable when you're not using the skills that might be up for the nerf hammer next league. So I decided to try and use an item I've not used in a long time, which was voidforge, and to pair it with Wildstrike, because both items do fizz as elemental, so it's easy to proc a lot of things like Trinity, get all your ailments going. It should in theory work, but as you'll see from the video, it doesn't, and it's just because Voidforge is really underwhelming at the moment with all the power creep in terms of boss health and stuff like that, and especially with combinators, there's very little reason to use a unique weapon. And Wildstrike again was really popular sort of 4, 5, 6 leagues ago. Now it just doesn't really match up with some of the other melee skills, but I don't think it's alone in that. You know, any melee skill you look at, like Frostblades, Double Strike, any of these forgotten skills, they just don't scale up and do enough damage without an absolute ton of investment. So the first iteration of the build was just to do a more budget-friendly one, which just had a few medium price uniques and rare items. So the idea, as mentioned, is Voidforge with Wildstrike, and I used Interrogation to get Brittle, Scorch, and Sap, and it's easy to max all of them out because you're doing a lot of each damage type. So the damage in the build came from good defense and armor and perseverance belt, and then obviously, as I said, getting max ailments. But even with all of this, the build really lacked single target. You had to use like a Var War Chief and Ancestral Protector, damage flask. You just had to use a lot to get the build doing any sort of damage at all. And when your flasks weren't available and your Ancestral War Chief wasn't available, single target was really poor. But in terms of how it mapped for something that was fairly budget, it actually mapped really well. The damage was enough to clear most packs because you're also firing out projectiles of Wildstrike that clear out a few of the mobs. And it did feel really tanky, like insanely tanky for, I think I had about 4.3k life. So we're using Fortify, we've got lots of armor and evasion. And it just felt really good. And then I was taking max resistances to get my resistances up to 79%. Chaos resistance was quite low, but I didn't really feel like it was too much of an issue. I never really felt that I died because I didn't have chaos resistance. In fact, I don't think I died with this version of the build, but I didn't really push content. I did one invitation, which felt fine. It just took forever, and that was the main problem with single target, but it felt really tanky. So I then decided to push it a bit further, put some more currency in. So I've got lots of good Omni gear sitting around from playing different characters with the amulet. Got a headhunter, and then I've got really good rares. That means I'll cap out my ailment avoidance and spell suppression. And then the other thing I added to the build was Forbidden Flame and Flesh to get overwhelm. They're quite cheap jewels. It just gives us a lot of base crit to make it a bit more reasonable to try and get close to 100% crit. And even with that gear on, I had a similar lightning strike build and it absolutely trounced content. You get up to like 30 million DPS. You do pretty much all the content in the game without blinking. Wildstrike just felt bad. I think even with all the buffs up and I had to add extra damage auras on and sacrifice Grace, it still probably only gets to about 10 million DPS, and that's with all your buffs and all your flasks up. And that's what I had to do. I had to give up life. I had to give up Grace just because I needed some more damage auras because it just wasn't really performing at all. So the final version of the build ran Wrath, Anger, Precision, Defiance Banner, and Determination. And because I had to get Cluster Jewels to get the reservation, I also had to take a lot of crit nodes to try and cap that out. The build only ended up with 3.3k life. Mapping felt absolutely fine, especially with the Headhunter, like because it's a physical damage build. Headhunter mapping actually felt really good. Once you get a few buffs up, you're not going to die. You can just go through, complete the maps really quickly. And they felt pretty decent, but all other content didn't feel that great. I think I died at Maven. I died at Cirrus, although that was a glitch, but I still died. And I did all the invitations. I think I died in one of them. I didn't do the feared because I don't think this build could do it. I just don't think it's got the survivability in terms of there's a bit of chaos damage in that fight. Don't have a huge amount of it. I think we're about 0%. I just didn't fancy spending the money to try it. Didn't try Uberbossing either. I know for a fact he wouldn't be able to do it. But in terms of when you're mapping with a Headhunter, the build felt really tanky because we get endurance charges the same as our max frenzy charges. And I've just gone for 6 frenzy charges because I don't want to go spending an absolute fortune on +1 frenzy Omni gear just to get a little more damage. And then obviously we've got Defiance Banner, Determination, and Fortify. So it actually, even though it only had 3.3k life, it had really, really good EHP. It felt pretty good all along, really, other than the usual damage over times that wreck a lot of characters. And I think as a league start build, if voidforge was an item that wasn't noob to drop, you could probably get some sort of Wildstrike Slayer build going that would actually get you to endgame pretty easily. But it's a noob to drop, so you'd have to league start with something else and wait for someone to drop it. And then if suddenly it gets buffed, for example, it might be really expensive. So it's never an option really for a league starter, which is a shame because I really liked the playstyle. I like Wildstrike. I like playing Slayer, but all those things combined need so much help to get up to a decent amount of DPS. So I was going to bring a build guide out, but it honestly wasn't worth it because there's no way I could recommend either version of the build. The budget version definitely lacked single target, and the high-end version is just nowhere near worth the investment that it took to even get it semi-viable. The reason I did it is I wanted to try a different way to get this character working because everyone will use Replica Foul Sphere, loads of +1 frenzy items, and then just stack your endurance charges and frenzy charges. But I didn't want to go buying loads of new gear for like the +1 frenzies, like I've said. So I decided to go with like a pretty stacked Omni character. I think we got up to 1.7k omniscience, very, very close to crit cap and nearly 500% crit multi. So on lots of other skills, this build would be 20 million DPS, 30 million DPS. But unfortunately, the combination of Wildstrike and voidforge just don't give you very many options to really ramp that damage up. So overall, I think it just highlights that, yeah, melee is in a bit of a sorry state right now. Same with uniques. Like, really, there's not hardly any unique weapons, if there are any, worth using. And it's just a shame. Like, I don't want uniques to be end game. Like, they shouldn't be the best in slot. But you should be able to build a character around a unique that can go and do most of the content in the game without having to spend 100 or 150x on it. And it felt amazing mapping, but in all honesty, that was just a headhunter. Any Fizz build as elemental is going to feel brilliant with a headhunter because nearly all of your damage buffs are gain X Fizz as this or X Fizz as that. So as long as you can grab one survivability buff from someone, you're going to absolutely trounce mapping. But I think that would be the same with any skill that worked the same way. So that's it for this video. Just wanted to bring out a quick showcase of, yeah, my failed attempt at bringing this build to life. So it'll be on to the next experiment, I suppose. That's it for this video. Really, really quick one. As always, thanks for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.